Greetings and welcome to this episode of Go XDGO, the official podcast of XDGO. XDGO is an action-oriented design leadership consultancy that focuses on helping organizations, teams, and individuals understand, embrace, and sustain the practice of human-centered experience design. I'm Matthew Doty, founder and principal consultant of XDGO. This episode continues a series of episodes focused on design leadership. In this series, I interview both leaders of design capabilities and teams, as well as other leaders who value good design. My goal is to explore what it means to be responsible for teams who design great experiences, as well as what it takes to organize and enable the practice of experience design from a leadership perspective. In this episode, I spend some time with Ling Li. Ling is a veteran designer and design leader with 10 years of experience, ranging from art direction, publication, advertising, packaging, brand, and user experience design. For those of you listening to this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to check out this podcast on our YouTube channel so you can see our smiling faces as we discuss, learn, and laugh together. A link to our YouTube channel is included in the description of this podcast. First of all, I really appreciate you talking with me because I think, so just for the people who are listening, Ling and I, and people who are listening are going to notice a pattern here. Ling and I crossed paths at Best Buy and we didn't really work a ton together. We were never really kind of on the same project in a way that made us kind of forced us to work together, but we kind of found each other and kind of had several conversations and just really from my perspective, I grew to really appreciate kind of like your background, what you were trying to do with your career, as well as what you were trying to do at Best Buy. And so as you and I kind of transitioned away from Best Buy at the same time, and you kind of took on a new leadership position for a smaller, kind of scrappier startup, as you were saying earlier, and I went off and started my own company. I've been since then. I've been very interested just to kind of see what you've been up to and how that's been. And then when I decided to do this kind of series of interviews or podcast episodes on design leadership, I really wanted your perspective because you're at kind of a rare moment in your design leadership career, if we can call it that. And I wanted to kind of pick your brain and see what your experience has been. So if you wouldn't mind kind of starting off, I don't want to, obviously I don't want to talk all the time because I'm not the value add here. You are. So
I would argue against that. And thank you for having me. I am so glad you reached out. But continue. What would you like?
Yeah, I would love to know, just if you wouldn't mind just painting a picture for whoever, for the something teen listeners that are going to listen to this. If you wouldn't mind just kind of painting a picture of kind of what is your career background, what's been your kind of trajectory, and how do you find and how did you get to where you are now? Mm-hmm. Just kind of wherever that leads you. Let's go with that. How's that?
No, that sounds good. Well, I will skip the birth to when I get to college. It'll be very long. But long story short, I'm first generation Chinese American. So my parents were immigrants, spoke very little English. We immigrated to the US in the late 90s. I have kind of been all over. I've lived in East Coast for a while and then moved to Midwest and kind of stay in Midwest. I have a hard time saying I'm from the Midwest, even though I've lived in the Midwest for, I want to say, good almost like 15, 20 years of my life. So I'm a Midwesterner, to be frank. I've always had a passion for art. I think my passion came from my roots of being an immigrant children. It was really hard for me as a child to learn English. That was one of the biggest barrier for me. It was much easier for my siblings because they were younger. They were toddlers to young children, whereas I was in my preteen, tweens. So learning English was
and that's just a hard time of life anyway.
It is. It was such a weird time where you're growing and you're approaching womanhood, but then you're put in a foreign environment. And at that time was one of my biggest struggles in learning English. Like, believe it or not, English was so hard for me that the only thing I'm able to get really good grades on were art classes and math.
Oh,
Because art and math are
interesting.
universal. There's no language to it, and it's understandable
Right.
by all people. And it was always one of those things I would just gravitate toward for I don't know why. Um, graduating high school, I have two choices. I either go into finance, do something business related, because my mom is an entrepreneur. She and my dad has started multiple businesses while they're raising four young children. So she saw a different path for me and is willing to invest in my future. But if something in me have never completely wanted to move just toward business or just be a mathematician or whatever it is that I would do with a math degree. And I have this passion around art and design. And it was one of those career path within my family, very traditional, very conservative. Like, that is such an unknown field. Like, what would you do with an
Mhm.
art degree? Everyone
Right.
was trying to talk me out of it, but I was very headstrong because I love that one quote that someone told me. I don't know who it is, but if you love what you do, then every day is a good day, right? If your hobby is your job, then you never have to work a day in your life. And I'm like, that is what I want to do.
Right.
So I've pushed forward with my design degree, went to our institute in Minneapolis. I wanted to leave um, my home state, but I didn't want to go super far because family has
Mhm.
always been one of those things really important to me. So I want to stay closer to home, but not like next door. So I moved next state over.
Okay. So, that's interesting because I thought you when your family came to the U.S., I thought you came to Minnesota.
No,
Where,
we were in the East Coast, mostly in New York for a good number of
okay,
years before we
that's right.
moved to
Okay.
the West. I was I lived in Kansas, South Dakota,
Mhm.
and then lastly, Minnesota.
Yeah.
So my parents are still in South Dakota, where I'm in Minnesota, and we're kind of like
Okay.
facing to each other. So when I said I want to be
Nice.
close but not next door, I moved from one state to like the next state.
Right.
So I'm still close. Like,
Right.
we're a really close knit family. Went to school at that time. And it's not that long time ago. I'm like not that old, I promise. It couldn't be more than like 15 years, I want to say. But back then, UX wasn't a thing. My options were either I go into a graphic design field and become a publisher, or marketing advertising and go work for a company in the East Coast. So that's what I end up doing. I enrolled in a graphic design program. I got my graphic design degree. Wasn't quite what I was looking for. I think you will notice a trend here. It was also during the recession when I graduated. So the timing
Oh
was
yeah.
either we're coming out of a recession, we're still in the middle of a recession where
Mhm.
people are not hiring. A lot of people have lost their job for months or at least a year, and the field was just not looking bright. And my options is either try to make it and potentially not work in a field that I set out to acquire a job in, or go back to school. And the way that the program was put together at my college or my institute was that you graduate with a bachelor's degree, but a lot of the credit would transfer. So even if I were to go back to school, I could transfer a majority of my credit and be able to take additional electives to complete a different degree. And so I
Oh
have two
yeah.
bachelor degree, although in traditional college, I think that's just like a double major. But in
Right.
my institute was two bachelor, which I'm very
Yeah.
proud of. So I have
Yes.
a bachelor in graphic design, and then I have a bachelor in design management, which I think
Wow.
coincide with design leadership a little bit. Um,
I,
but
I think there's probably a little bit of a
yeah,
relationship.
like I was already on that path, not realizing.
Right. Right.
Um, so graduated, I was very fortunate. I think throughout all of my entire career, it was the right timing, the right opportunity, and I always
Mhm.
had this. this luck in finding the right leaders or mentors. So I've been very lucky in my career. I graduated college and was able to work for Target right away. I was fresh out of school, no experience whatsoever. I was very fortunate enough to get hired on Target in-house design. That's what they were called back then. I don't know if they changed since then, but it was this really it's like a mini agency within a Fortune 100 or 500 company back then, and it was eye opening. It wasn't something that I saw for myself, but that experience I think really helped launch me and open my eyes to this bigger world. Because my perception of designs of the industry was so narrow, and I saw only one path forward. And Target really opened my eye. I was hired on as a social art director, and I did a lot of the traditional art and design, advertising, marketing. We did website designs, we did packaging designs, art direction, photography, layouts. It was all of the things that you think a graphic designer would do, and I did.
Right.
But when I say I was really fortunate, Target was also one of those companies that are doing UX designs, but aren't calling it UX design. I guess back then it wasn't as well known. So a lot of people were practicing that craft, but didn't have the same title and recognition as we do today.
Right.
Users.
Well, yeah. What did they call it?
We were website designers or digital designers. We weren't user experience designers.
Or like interactive designers.
None of those.
Yeah.
We were doing it in small ways. We were practicing. It was just not well known. There was no programs or accreditations or certifications within the college space to hone that ground. So I was very fortunate to stumble into it. Once I did stumble into it, I realized that's what I wanted to do in college, but it wasn't a thing. After having 2 bachelor, I didn't want to go back to school again. Then I was laid off from Target.
I don't understand why.
I mean, why would I need a 3rd bachelor? Who would ever want to do that? It just doesn't make sense. But I really wanted to be in the UX field.
Yeah.
I finally have a name to it. I finally know what that discipline's about. I saw how exciting that field is. I've always loved technology, but I was just not an engineer. Like I've taken coding classes in high school as well as in college, and it didn't work with my brain. And this is where I think my math skill failed me. Have I fully pursued that path, I could be an engineer if I want. At that point, I was too far down the arts field to move parallel to the engineering field, even though it's a very similar industry. So layoff. Really want to do UX, don't want to go back to school. And then I did the next best thing I can think of, which is learn by doing. So I took a ton of freelance projects, like passion projects, also with contracting jobs with different companies, and slowly build up my UX portfolio by learning the craft and practicing it and doing it in a day-to-day life and getting compensated for it as well, obviously. And that kind of launched my my career. Like I was able to go from a job to another job to another job, and each one helped me learn a new skill, help give me an opportunity to kind of hone my craft, achieve that mastery. And every step of the way, there was always someone who saw something in me that I perhaps didn't see for myself, and really pushed me to do different things. I learned interaction designs, wireframe, prototyping, really homing my graphic design skills and be able to translate that into user interface designs. And then I was fortunate enough to get hired on at Best Buy. And that really opened my eye, because before I was working in a smaller company doing small designs, small user experience designs here and there, and sketch practice, different things. But Best Buy kind of took it to a new level. So again, another fortunate opportunity, right timing. It was at a time where UX designer, and not a lot of people, like the supply and demand, not a lot of people have the right skills, have the right years of experience, and to be able to be in front of these large company and demonstrate that I can do this. So it was fortunate that way of timing and an opportunity. And I've been with Best Buy for, I want to say, going on like good 6 years before I moved on to my current position as the UX director. At my time at Best Buy, I worked my way up. I started as a designer, then became a senior UX designer, and then I was a lead for a little bit, then I was promoted to manager, and then I did a ton of different things. So I really have done everything in UX.
Right.
Interaction design, information architecture, prototyping, visual design, which is equivalent of user interface designs, and then I've moved to a more of a strategic direction, which is taking experience design to a new level, kind of bringing together a lot of different disciplines to solve a really unique, like a big rock problem for a company, which I think not a lot of user experience or experience designed discipline get to do. So that was really exciting. Bring together both researchers, strategists, designers, and put together these really nimble teams to tackle a problem and really solve a big business.
Yeah.
It was like really exciting.
Is that when you and I started talking?
Yes, that was the time.
Okay.
You're starting your more customer-centric, customer-focused experience.
Yeah. Yep.
Infusing human-centered design practices, where we are trying to start up a similar, I want to say a similar type of effort, but more focused on store operation and employee experience.
Right, and the employee experience. Yeah.
To try to tackle both together, could be a multi-year long project where we needed to move more nimbly and to tackle like projects and then problems and then move on to the next one and move on to the next one. So I think we were moving in parallel, solving different business problems for a very different set of audience. But I think it's around that time leadership saw a need and a value needing to evolve and innovate, but in a different way. And that just so happened it was like two different teams with like very similar efforts.
Yeah, I remember it's so fun to just hear you recount this time, because I remember like my conversations with you and my conversations with Bridget and my conversations with Timothy, and we were all we were all kind of talking about this like why do we live in these different silos in the organization? Like why are we, like from an organizational standpoint, like why is this? And that's why I was so excited for the big kind of roll up that happened before you and I left. Yeah, exactly. Because it's funny. Like I think like you and Timothy and Bridget and me and all these different people were like, well, yeah, I mean, org charts and structure honestly don't matter like to us, but I mean, it's very clear at an organization like Best Buy that the org structure is either a help or a hindrance. Because it is what people cling to in order to figure out how to navigate the organization. And if it's not structured right, then you get all these kind of baked in disconnects, even though like people like you, me, and others are like, well, no, we don't have to be disconnected. But I guess the different entities that we were working with, like, were kind of de-incentivized to work with each other. And so it made it harder for us. So anyway, sorry, that's not what this podcast is about, but it's just so fascinating. It's fun to hear again, kind of your perspective and what was going on at that time.
It was an interesting time, right? We had our first CEO that is a female in 50 years in the company history. There was all sorts of new initiatives, new directions, and then I think at that point there was a convergence of why do we do it this way? Like, why don't we do it differently if we're in this transformative phase of our history? And I think that's when people start realizing that although these structures worked, and it's something that we know, right? We're able to point to something. It's like, I know exactly what that is because it's a shared language at an organizational level. But then at the same time, that was holding us back from doing bigger, better, greater things. And it takes people from like the executive level to realize that that is the new direction we want to go before it can trickle down, because it's such a big company that it takes a while, right? Even though we're soldiers who are championed and are pointing our fingers and say, hey, this doesn't work, and that could be better. But our efforts are almost constrained are at the area that we are operating in, and it needs to take multi-level effort for something that big to be moved through in this gigantic engine in a way.
Yeah.
I was glad to see that, but
Mm-hmm.
with any conversions, there is this meshing of things, and you put so many disciplines, so many experts, and these great talented people together. I think at some point it's like water and oil, right? When you start mixing it, it works for a little bit, and then it starts to separate.
Yeah.
And I think that huge management part that perhaps we didn't do as great of a job
Right.
on.
Right. Yeah. It's like the sorry. Yeah. It's like the good news is we're all together now. Mm-hmm. The bad news is we're all together now.
Toward my end of my career at Best Buy, I was leading a team of researchers. Super fortunate. Oh my goodness, the smartest, the most talented people. I was wowed by the researchers on my team every day. I think it was an area of focus that I didn't have deep expertise on. So I have this enormous imposter syndrome. Like, should I be leading this team? Am I a good leader? How do I know I'm guiding them well? Like all of those naysayings, the gremlins started coming out, because before I was always comfortable because it was designed as UX, human centered practices and methodologies that I know well, but research has never been an area of my focus. I'm not a researcher. I didn't do research. I've learned research because I've worked with so many great researchers, and research was a deeply embedded practice within our team, but I was never that. And to be in a position to lead a team of researchers, I was at first very glad. I mean, wow, someone saw something in me, but then at the same time, my own self inner voice are saying that I wasn't good enough. I shouldn't be. And I think that was a point where I started realizing perhaps I strayed too far away from my roots. I need to get back to designs and product designs and human-centered designs, or whatever it is that I felt like was lacking then.
Right.
So that started my departure. Like, I started thinking about it. When should I start? What should I look for? What is that role that I was looking for? And I wasn't happy. I was at a point in my career where I was not satisfied with what's given to me. It's always like, you're promoted, you lead this, you do that. And to me, that just didn't feel like good enough anymore. And I wanted to create my own career, own role. Something I saw for myself was be able to combine both what I love about design, the passion, with what I love and want to do, which is more of the leadership. And I think that's what started the whole, like, well, maybe it's time to leave Best Buy. It's time to look for the next thing, and not just be okay with what people gave me, but really look for what I want. And what I want was what I have. So it takes a while to get there. I think a lot of people in similar to my position is it takes a lot of, it takes experience, it takes self-awareness, and it really takes timing. And you have to put in the work to realize that when you get to a certain point, what you're going after is no longer what you want to do. Your idea or what you saw for yourself may have changed while your journey to get there, on your journey to get there. And that was a moment for me. I'm sure it's very similar for you as well. When you get to a certain point, you realize, you know what, that thing that I've been working so hard for is no longer the thing that I want. And now I need to look for something either parallel or maybe something in a slightly different direction. Not abandoning hope, but more of redirecting. So I did that, and now I am at a smaller firm where I get to be more hands-on. Like I said, going back to my roots, do some of the designs. I think I've been in a leadership role in a really long time that I didn't get to practice my craft anymore. But I'm so passionate about leadership that I didn't want to abandon that, because I learned a ton and grown a ton. And I think there is a space for both a practitioner of design as well as a leader of design, and be able to do two together really well. And my current Travel Net solution is a veteran company in the vacation rental management system industry. Yeah, they're software as design type of services company, and they're almost mimicking a startup, like rapid growth. I think it's really taken off for us. So that was the really exciting part that launched my departure.
Yeah.
I guess in a way. So now I'm here.
Here you are. Here you are. That is so. I mean, what an interesting journey. And like you've said several things that I kind of want to unpack, and where I'd like to start is I want to start talking about like this imposter syndrome thing that you talked about when you were leading the team of researchers. Um, and one of the things that I think leaders in general, especially leaders of like crafts or practices, um, struggle with is if they themselves don't have a certain skill or a background in a certain skill in the team that they're trying to lead. That's something that just is struggled with is how do I lead a team of people who is better than I am at a certain thing, and like what did you what were some of the things that you did to kind of combat that imposter syndrome or in that situation? Because I got to observe you from afar, and from my perspective you were knocking it out of the park.
Oh,
But I mean, yeah, inside I'm sure you were like, what do I do here? How do I be effective? Like what were some of the lessons learned there?
for me, it started with self-awareness. I think
Mm,
it was in a space where I didn't um, I didn't understand. Like intellectually, I understood I was in a different space, leading a different set of teams. But self-awareness is knowing thyself, right? If you know what are your strengths and your weaknesses, then you are better able to articulate them. And it goes to a lot of the really foundational leadership practice and principles. A lot of it was relying on I'm the type of person where if I have a problem, I research it like no one else. So I did a ton of reading. There are a lot of thought leaders out there who have written extensively about these type of topics and
mhm,
subjects.
mhm.
So I did a ton of research, reading, following leaders who have been, practicing their skills, and then internally reaching out to leader that I admire and just observing leaders within the company.
Mhm.
What I learned about myself, the self awareness piece, is that I don't have to know it all. I think that
Mhm.
was one of the misconceptions going in, that when you're leading a team, you have to be the person that knows everything and have the right answers every time. And that's what
Sorry.
I expected of
I'm
myself. I was like, oh,
yeah, I'm laughing because I'm like, yep.
and at that
That's
point,
yeah.
it's, it's just like, it's okay to not know. I have this
Mhm,
great team of really talented, smart people who knows it. I should rely
mhm,
on them more. I should trust
mhm,
and earn trust from my team and be vulnerable and be willing to say, I don't know. Like, what do you
mhm,
think? Tell me.
mhm.
So it's relying on that trust, it's building trust, and then emotional intelligence, knowing that it's not possible for a single individual to know everything and be able to say the right thing, do the right thing, and be the
Mhm.
right person at every situation. And I think that just kind of lift the burden from my shoulder. I'm like, it's okay. We're all doing our
Right.
best as long as
Mhm,
we're on the same path, have a shared goal, we're moving toward that, and
mhm,
the destination might not be where we want to go, but at least
mhm.
we know it's a meaningful journey. And at the
Right.
end of the day, we'll still do our job, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm,
it's a lot of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and now like developing your soft skills. So a lot of the core
mhm.
leadership foundations, be able to do
Right.
that. That really helped me through. And then along the way,
Mhm,
I have a lot of great mentors that were guiding me. So I
mhm.
wasn't completely on my own. I felt
Sure.
that
Sure.
way. Um, so those are some of the things that I think
Yeah.
it's true and try, right? It's not just in that
Yeah.
situation, it's in
Mhm,
every situation if you're able to
mhm.
rely on all the people around you, practice good soft skills, and really
Mhm.
hone in on your emotional intelligence. It'll get you through a lot of things.
Right. So, if you're an introvert like me, all of that will feel like work, but it's definitely worth it.
It's really rewarding. Like the, the time, energy that you
Mhm.
need to put into it, you will reap hundredfold.
Yeah, absolutely. I love something that you just said that I want to pick at a little bit more. Is well, actually, I want to ask a question. When you were describing this, when you first get into like a leadership position, there's this perception, and I think it's near universal that anybody who kind of steps into a new leadership position has this sense that for some reason that they have to know it all.
Mhm.
Where do you think that comes from? What why do we feel that way?
Mhm. Mm, I think it comes from a place of good. We all want to
Mhm,
do good, be good, and we
mhm.
don't want to let someone else down, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if
Mhm,
someone believe in you so much that they promote you, they give
mhm,
you the space and to be able to make it your own, and that
mhm,
comes with a lot of pressure.
mhm,
At the end of the day, I think that pressure kind of grew and become a thing of its own. And I think that experience
mhm.
is a little bit different from everyone, but for me
Sure.
specifically, has always been. I think this goes back to my family again. I'm the oldest of four children. My
Mhm,
parents were immigrant, and we're in a new environment where we all have to rely on each other.
mhm,
So a lot of times I end up being the person who's translating for my parents and are doing a lot of things that frankly, at the end of the day, the parents should be doing, but because of our situation, I end up doing it. So there's always
mhm.
this pressure of you're the oldest, you have to set an example, you have to be the model sister, the model daughter, and
Mm,
you have to fill that gap. If there is ever
mhm.
a gap within our family, the person who's most qualified, the most able, have to do it. I think that
Right,
kind of stay
right.
with me just my entire life. And when I'm put in a new
Yeah.
position, especially in a leadership position, that the idea of needing to be a good manager, a good leader, you got to be there
Mhm.
and by wisdom and guidance and do things right. Kind of go back
Yeah,
to roots. I think for me specifically, I don't know
yeah.
about, but I think that just it grew. It grew. It
Mhm.
was this great opportunity. You get to the oil is your oyster, and then it started growing into this monster that sits on your shoulder all the time. And
Right.
say that right. You should have write the email this way. You should have done that. Like you're always
Mhm,
being apart yourself, and I think that's
mhm,
such a disservice, especially in a moment where it can make or
mhm,
break. Like if you let that monster grow so big where it become more significant than you are as an individual, and then
mhm.
this great moment in your career could be your nightmare. And
Yeah.
I was the one who's turning this pivotal moment in my career into a nightmare for myself. And
Mhm,
I was miserable for like the longest time.
mhm.
So,
Wow.
so
Well,
that
thank you. Yeah, thank you for
was
sharing all of that. That's really interesting. Really, really fascinating. So I'm a middle kid. So I don't understand that oldest child thing, but I do. It's funny. I actually see some of what you're talking about in my oldest kid.
Mhm.
It's just I don't know. It's just kind of fascinating. Um, Another thing that I want to kind of unpack a little bit more is uh, during our conversation today, you've used a couple different words, and most everybody that I've talked to in this series so far uses both of these words, and so I like to spend a little bit of time understanding your perspective on what is the difference between the two words are management and leadership, and I wonder from your perspective if you see a significant difference between the two, and if so, what is that? What is the difference between management and leadership?
is a great question, and I feel like I'm not going to do
Thank
it
you.
justice. So I'm going to attempt to fumble my way through it.
All right. If
I
you
will
if
say
you mess up, we can cut stuff out and make you look like a genius. So does that sound good?
that does sound good. Um, I will start with what is leadership.
Okay.
A leader is someone another person willing to follow. Someone who is both inspiring, motivating, persuasive, and influence. And they're able to bring people along and people are willing to follow. I think that's what's a leader. And that can be in any industry. It's not exclusive to design or the design.
Right.
I think a leader exists everywhere at every level, at every age group. Like you can be a leader in your kindergarten group and not realize it. So I don't think there is this mystical thing. But a good leader is someone who understands that leadership isn't force. It's not when you exert power and you have authority over someone. And I think that's what a manager is. We see manager as this superior. Like a lot of people say supervisors, my boss, like someone who more experienced than you, someone who have more authority, both, you know, with your work or with your career. And it becomes this almost like this oppressive power in a way. Because also another thing I've heard is manager like tells you what to do. Manager firing authority. Like is manager a bad word? The analogy that we associate with manager are all negative. And then I think in a lot of ways that shapes how we think about managers. The managers isn't bad, but anyone can be a manager as long as you're promoting. Someone promotes you, you're a manager. But to be a leader, it isn't something that you promote for, right? A leader emerge, and you see a leader when you see followers of that leader. That's when you know you truly is a leader, or you saw a leader is when someone is willing to follow when you don't have authority over that person.
Interesting.
So I keep coming back to leadership is like persuading and influencing people, not in a manipulative way, but this person is so good at articulating, so inspiring, so motivating that you're willing to follow this person for whatever reason. And there's no good in it for you other than I want to be on this journey with this person because I love what I love and I want to be there.
Interesting. So, okay. This actually is a great segue. And for anybody listening, we didn't talk about this before. A question that I always like to ask in these conversations is, is if leadership is something that is less chosen and more something that kind of emerges naturally. And I love what you said about you can tell who the leader is if there's followers. That's a really fascinating point of view. And I love how you keep using words like someone who's inspiring, someone who people want to kind of be with on whatever journey they're on. If somebody is in a point in their career and they feel like they want to be a leader, they want to eventually become a leader, not a manager so much in the terms of what you're talking about, but if they want to become more of a leader, what would if they asked you, said, "Hey, I want to become more of a leader. What should I do?" Like what are the things that someone who wants to become a leader, what should they start doing?
I would start by asking the question of why you want to be a leader.
Okay.
Knowing what you do as an individual and where you want to go with your leadership, what type of leader you want to be, will help you discover what are your next steps. An example for me is I've that pivotal moment when I realized that I don't just want to be a good manager, I want to be a good leader, is when I realized leadership is about people. It's not about the work. The work is important because at the end of the day, that's what we're being paid to be there to do, and work will always be there.
Right.
That's what a manager does. A manager manages the work, and the people just kind of comes with it. You know, oftentimes we'll hear people refer to people, employee, as labor or resources. And I think
sends the shiver up my spine.
Always moving pieces around, optimizing it and making sure that all the right things are in the right place so you can get from point A to point B. Not saying that manager couldn't be leaders, but if you truly think about a manager's duty, it's moving these pieces around. But when a manager becomes a leader, then it's about the people. The work just happens when you take care of the people.
Right.
So it's for me, it started with I was very socially awkward for like the longest time. So I have to relearn a lot of my social skills, how to talk to people, how to listen well, and really
Yeah.
be there, like active and participating and
Yeah.
and
That
make
that must
positive.
have been that must have been way before we met.
I'm always professional. I was an awkward person. I think I've always come
Mhm.
across professional, but what I truly wanted at the time was to be able to deeply connect with someone in a
Mhm.
way that help us both be better. And I wasn't doing that. I wasn't,
Mhm.
I was, I was so focused on the work that I almost always um, discounted the person or the
Mhm.
people in those situations.
Yeah.
That was a moment I realized, like, if I continue on this path, like I will always be a manager and I really want to be a
Mhm.
leader. So that shifted my thinking of what got you here won't get you there, because it's always about the craft. You've been really passionate and you've been really good at something. And that's no longer what's needed from me in my new role that I want to be in. So then that self awareness of, okay, I cannot operate the same way I have and rely on my existing mental models and my decision making because it's not working.
Mhm.
And that
Right.
was to,
Right.
it's all about the people. It's always the people. When you go to the people, you take care of the people, then the people will just naturally take care of the work and then everything will be golden. So that was like
Holy
my
crap.
trajectory
That
of
is
like I
really
shifted.
good.
And every decision that I have ever made since then is about how does this impact the person? Does it help this
Yeah.
person? Does it hold them back? Does it help them grow? Does it mentor them?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we're still going to get to the work done. But
Mhm.
if you approach it from that lens, your
Mhm.
decision making is very different, right? If you approach it from a work
Wow.
perspective or the individual perspective, and that shift helped me see that this is what a great leader is. The great leader at the end of
Yeah.
the day is taking care of the people who are taking care of the work.
That's that's
Mhm.
just that's gold. That's really, really cool.
That's from personal experience because I did it the wrong way. Then I realized it was the wrong thing to do. So then I did it the right way
Right.
after I made all of the mistakes.
Right. And it's so funny. Like so when over the last decade plus, I've had opportunities like in job interviews or in whatever settings to kind of articulate my philosophy on leadership, and it's very similar to that principle that you just outlined. What I say is, my leadership philosophy is very, very simple. I want to come into a situation. I want to hire amazing people that I know I can just aim at work, and it'll be done in really amazing ways. And then my job then is to get out of their way so that
Mhm.
they can do their job. And do, but again, my job is to also like make sure that they have everything they need, and that I'm lifting them up, and that I'm shining light on them,
Mhm.
so that they can not only do the work but also receive the recognition that they're due. Our job as good leaders is to stay out of the way of great work, but to enable it, like to support it, to be on that end, to help be the foundation. And it,
Mhm.
it, it just sounds like a lot of what you're saying. And I too learned these things through experience of doing it wrong.
Well, you're describing servant leadership, which I think is
Yeah.
it's perfect for where we're at in an industry that's
Yeah.
exploding, and there's almost a lack of good leadership within our space. And I think
Yeah.
if more people
Mhm.
can focus on building their leadership skills at all level, like you don't have to be a
Yeah.
20, 30
Mhm.
year veteran to
Mhm.
have good leadership skills or want to be a
Nope.
good leader. It should really be nurture at every level so we could have more leaders in the future.
Yeah. Find and amplify the awesome in each other.
Mhm.
Like that's the goal. So we are almost out of time. Like we're like 5 seconds away from being out of time. But I do want to something that I want to ask you, is in coming to this conversation, is there anything that we didn't get to discuss that you really wanted to kind of say? Uh, things that you wanted to make sure to, hey, when I talk with Matthew, I want to make sure I say this.
Mm.
Um, Go.
I think we covered almost everything. The
Okay.
one thing I want to kind of um, bring up again
Hmm.
is that none of us is alone in our journeys. There's
Hmm.
always people around, and don't be
Hmm.
afraid to reach out and ask for help. We
Hmm.
all feel like we have to go at it alone, but we don't have to. That's the beauty of
Hmm.
it. We can
Yeah.
be on whatever journey that we're on and be able to bring people along.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that I wish more people would do more of, especially for someone who is transitioning between a individual contributor role to maybe a managerial role, or you're moving on to the next chapter of your career. The transitions is often something that people forget about, and the transitions are almost the most important part when you're in the transition, right? How you go about it, and take care of yourself so you can take care of others. So don't go at whatever you're doing alone. Always bring someone with you.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. That's actually a great place to wrap up. I really, really appreciate you spending time with me this morning. And so for anybody who liked what Ling had to say, go check her out on LinkedIn. She's pretty awesome, as you can tell. Anything else?
No, and thank you for that podcast. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Go XDGO. A special thanks to my guest, Ling Li, for joining me today. For more conversations on design leadership, please like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. To learn more about XDGO and how we can help you, your team, or your organization build and strengthen your experience design capabilities, please visit us at www.xdgo.io.